Yeah, thank you, Phoebe. So, yeah, I guess, it's all going to link into how we do create environments for people to feel that they can thrive and to feel that they can disclose in as well. So I know a lot of you won't work in music as such, but, I think it will all be relatable. So firstly, to talk about my relationship with disclosure and disability. As some of you will know, I used to be a tour manager. I was working in the music industry. I was booked out. I was working everywhere. So I was working as a tour manager, and unfortunately, I was booked out, and everything was going very well. And then I noticed that my eyes were changing, and I and I went to the doctors and had it all checked out. Unfortunately, I found out I had a condition called retinitis pigmentosa, which ultimately meant that my eyes were changing, specifically in dark environments. And I had to change everything, really. I had to stop driving, which as a tour manager was like, losing your right foot as a footballer. And it was a difficult period because, I went from being completely booked out and seeing my career there to not really knowing where my future was. But the process was an interesting one, because whereas I should have felt that I was able to disclose and tell people about that, I didn't. I felt that I needed to hide. I wondered what people would think if I used the word disability. I wondered if I'd receive less work. I worried if there'd be stigma and discrimination. So rather than ask for the reasonable adjustments that might have helped me through that, I somewhat hid. And I made excuses for jobs that I couldn't do because they needed me to drive. Some jobs were on tour buses, so I was able to sort of get away with that and without sort of disclosing. But to a lot of the artists and promoters I work with, I kept it in the dark. I felt that I could hide it as long as I could find other ways of getting around the driving. I felt like the changes in my eyes were quite minimal at the time, so I could still work in backstage environments. And the problem with RP is, the condition I have, is that it predominantly affects night vision. So you can imagine how that kind of manifests in dark backstage environments where, I would be walking into things, dropping things. I broke an extremely expensive guitar on stage once because I missed a lead and pulled it off its stand. So little things like this were happening, but I definitely worried for my income, for my future, should I sort of choose to disclose. So that was the process. And during this time, I started managing artists on the side, because I knew I had to make a plan for the future. I knew I had to come off the road. And my plan was, obviously, I couldn't jump into music management straight away and expect to earn enough from 20% commissions as opposed to healthy day rates. So it was definitely a sort of weaning process, and one that I tried to do, gradually. I was building up towards finishing tour management probably in a couple of years from now. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. And there were no live music gigs to speak of anyway. So it was at that point that I kind of decided that I would make the leap and go into management, leave tour management behind. And it was also sort of during that downtime that I kind of reflected on that process and started to say, why did I choose to do that? Why did I decide that not disclosing was the right path? What was the thought process? What was I worried about, and what were the legitimate concerns? Or would actually, if I'd been honest from the start, would there have been people willing to make reasonable adjustments and to work with me and change the environment for me to work in? I think that was the sort of thought process that I went through. And then I've kind of gone from one extreme to the other, from completely hiding it to now talking about it and really wanting to explore the reasons and try and make it easier for other people in my position to find it easier to disclose. And there's some important stories to tell about disclosure. The very limited times I did disclose, they were very positive experiences. So I think there's a lot to be said for talking about the process. And my work isn't just based around telling people they should disclose. It's more about creating the right environment so that other people feel able to disclose. So that's kind of the things that we're talking about today. So during that process of deciding to jump into management, I established Harbourside Artist Management. I was already working with my artist, Victoria Modesta, by complete chance. She was an artist I used to tour manage, but she's known as the world's first bionic pop artist. And, you know, when I got the diagnosis and obviously decided that I was going to move into management, and then I was already managing Victoria, I decided that, you know, why not make this a theme, really? You know, Victoria is an artist with disability who people recognize. I'm dealing with this thing and talking about it, so why not make that the kind of ethos of the company? So we're trying to sort of change the perceptions of disability in the music industry and increase representation. So I just wanted to show you a brief video of Victoria, and kind of just to show how we try and talk about disability in a more positive light, and we're trying to create a powerful message about disability, and how actually, you know, with the right messaging, people can see disability in more of a positive light. So here's my artist, Victoria Modesta, with a video. Some of you may know it, but I think it's an important one.
I'm progressive, not aggressive. Stop damaging yourself with your ambition. Your insults, they just give me ammunition. I got a full clip and a hot whip. Are you ready? Cause we're going on a guilt trip. Assemble me
Malsaktorov ujčile. Stakmavan kobraznik. Ujče! Asta sak, Victoria. Chapter pentru tot, Victoria. Cum se stavi?
Okay, so yeah, just a sort of example there of how, I shall start that playing again. Just an example there of how, you know, we try and sort of portray disability in a more positive and powerful light. And, you know, it's interesting there that, you know, also you'd see that we're trying to portray it in a sort of a sexy light as well. And that kind of created some interesting comments in the comments section for that video. Like some people were saying, and I think this says a lot, you know, that they didn't feel comfortable that disability was, that it was trying to be made sexy, which I think is, you know, an interesting comment, really, isn't it? You know, you'd have to question why somebody would think like that. So anyway, we are talking today about disclosure in the music industry and how we can create environments for people with disability to thrive in. And this will sort of link into various topics. This is all to do with some results of a consultation I did earlier this year with Arts Council funding, looking at how we can create environments for disabled people to thrive, and also looking at disclosure in the music industry and, you know, what's happening there. And, you know, I'm sure I'm not the only person who went through that kind of journey, and talking about how we can make it easier for disabled people to work in the industry, both with sort of venue access issues and other sort of disclosure problems. So today's session will cover the sort of main areas that I covered in that consultation, which is disclosure in the music industry, venue access, and reasons for the statistical disparity. And by that, I mean that Arts Council England found that 1.8% of the music industry identified as having a disability, and that is both on stage and off stage, whereas obviously the national statistic is close to 18%. So there's obviously a disparity there. So we're investigating why. And then linking into the sort of point of the topic on how we can help drive change and some of the amazing resources that are available through organisations such as Attitude is Everything, I'm sure you're all aware of. So we'll go with that. So, okay, I'm going to run through the results and some of the key results from the survey. I tried to get up to 50 people, you know, it's quite a small sort of ambitious target at the start. And in the end, I found 150 people who identified as working in the music industry with a disability or long-term health condition. So firstly, we looked at disclosure. And as you can see, do you choose to disclose your non-visible impairment or health condition to those you work with? The vast majority is sometimes, but as you can see, only, I think it's 18% there, so that they always disclose. So, from that, you can take it that 82% of people either only sometimes or never disclose their long-term health condition or disability in the music industry. So many sort of people joining me in the position that I was in. Just in the comments then, and from the stories that sorry, I'm just picking up on some of the comments there. Thank you very much. Some of the things that I talked about in my introduction on my relationship with disability. Can anyone put in the comments, what do they think the reasons are someone might choose not to disclose? Are there any sort of things that spring to mind from you as the audience on, what people's fears might be? Discrimination.
Rona, I've just seen you've raised your hand. Did you want to say something verbally?
Yeah, I mean, discrimination is what I was going to say, really. And also, people just have very limited experience of disabled people, because we are very marginalized in society, and we do have separate schools and all the rest of it. So people don't necessarily come into contact with visibly disabled people, and when they do, they don't really know what to expect, and they sometimes overcompensate. But at the same time, they're less likely to allow you to show you what you're capable of, and they limit your opportunities and chances. I put in the chat that on the day that I decided to disclose my disability, I was told my contract wouldn't be renewed after 3 months. And they said it was because the other person was coming back. That could have been a coincidence. It may not have been. But my point is that people do have very limited views because of the way we are marginalized as disabled people in society.
Yeah. You've covered a lot of the points there very well. Yeah, certainly. That they're all valid. We've got discrimination, fear of being disadvantaged. People will make assumptions. Worried you'd lose work is obviously a key one. Potential loss of work, and perhaps not accepting it personally yet. Yeah, good one. Complications surrounding anticipated perception in mind and reality and the future of their career. Yeah, all very valid. And I said in a blog I published at the weekend that the only thing worse than actual stigma and discrimination is the fear of stigma and discrimination, how disabling that can be to have that worry. But here were the sort of survey responses. As you can see, yeah, big one there, 61% almost said that they worried they'd be seen less capable of doing their job. 37% worried they'd receive less work opportunities. A prior negative experience at 33%, which, it's one is too many, obviously, but there are positives to take from that. And we'll talk about positive disclosure stories a little bit later on. But as you can see, pretty much all the ones that we've just mentioned there: fear or experience of discrimination, 46% of people. This is an interesting one. Has withholding details of your non-visible impairment or health condition ever compromise your health or well-being in the workplace? Vast majority, yes. I think 69% said that yes, it had. My example would be banging my shins on countless risers during stage changeovers in my days as a tour manager. I've walked into glass walls. I've walked into pillars. I've come out of shows with more bruises than a boxer. And it's clear that particularly artists as well, a lot of things with access to stage, which we'll come on to shortly, are still a problem, and people are consistently affecting their health and well-being, which is of course the one thing that we should be looking to protect more than anything else. But it just shows that kind of need to work is always going to overtake your health and safety at times. On the occasions you chose to disclose your non-visible impairment health condition to those you work with, which of these best describes your overall experience? Lots of mix, but as you can see, more positive than negative experiences. On the 2 occasions I chose to disclose before I did so publicly, I only had positive experiences. You know, I had so much fear, but on the 2 occasions I did once to a promoter, they made reasonable adjustments, made sure I was always on jobs that didn't require driving. Another time to an artist, they wanted to keep me on the gig, so they arranged for the session musicians to drive the splitter. Just small things like that, but overall positive experiences, and I think that's an important thing to talk about. You know, I didn't get into this just to talk about how difficult things are, and don't get me wrong, it is very difficult for a lot of people, and a lot of people have had negative experiences, but there are people out there who do want to make reasonable adjustments for you. A few things that people said in the comments regarding disclosure. Very mixed experiences here. As you can see, I was seen as incapable and never received hours again. Experiences range from completely accommodating to patronizing to hostile. Everyone's been cool about me and have done their best to help, so an overwhelmingly positive one there. Some employees tried to make the accommodations I needed. One employer told me it was not their job. One told me that I was lying and wanted to get a disability. Yeah, so mixed experiences. Talking about venue access now, and I know there's a few venues on that will be interested in this, and maybe there's other organisations that aren't necessarily music venues or work specifically in music, but I think it's all relatable to creating the right environments for disabled people to thrive in. So have you encountered barriers when accessing a music venue for work? And 67% have said yes. So the majority of people who have a disability or long-term impairment have had problems in music venues. And again, if we could just invite you to comment, what do you think some of the barriers people might face in music venues are, considering that not all barriers are physical access related? Can anyone think of some reasons that people would face barriers in music venues? Anybody, any comments on what those issues might have been? Physical access to the stage, yeah, additional support. Inaccessible backstage areas, suitability of venue staff to deal with disabilities. Brilliant answer. Yeah, and that's what I was going to say here, is that you know, not all access barriers are physical access. It's sometimes attitudinal as well. You can see the majority of these answers are physical, and the first answer there that came up was access to stage, which it still staggers me that is the main issue that people face. You can see here 67% of people said they'd had access to stage, whereas some venues will be structurally not right. It's you know, it's incredible. Ramps to stage still aren't an everyday thing at some venues. There are some incredible venues that you know, do that and a lot more, but some venues are clearly still not prioritizing something as simple as that. And the amount of people I spoke to on this consultation, artists who said that they've been lifted onto stage, was incredible, and that people thought that was an acceptable and normal thing to do. But as we talked about attitudinal, the attitude of venue staff members, 52% of people said that they had run into issues with venue staff. I was once tour managing a show where a girl with a guide dog had the guide dog taken away at the door. They said that the animals weren't allowed in the venue, and the girl was walked to her seat, but they kept the guide dog in the office. And on tweeting about this, the artist saw it and told me, and we had to go and sort it out. And you know, you'd like to think that's not because people are nasty and malicious, but that they clearly didn't know what the rules were for the venue and just didn't understand disability. You know, it's an example of the problems that people might run into with just staff not being educated and taught about the right things to do around disability. Have you ever arrived at a music venue for work commitment but not been able to carry out your duties due to barriers relating to an impairment or a health condition? I think, you know, overwhelmingly this is you know, 34% seems quite low, but considering this is people actually arriving for a gig, and finding that they can't do the job that they were being paid to do. You know, I think that statistic is actually quite high. You'd like to think that these things could be ironed out in advance, but to actually arrive for a venue and not being able to do the job is another story. A few comments on what people said as well. Again, lots of things about being walked to stage, cables on stage, carried to stage. People saying, I get anxious if I think there are trip hazards and it has affected my ability to perform on occasions. I've let people lift my wheelchair and me on stage, which is not safe. I constantly take work in venues I know I will struggle in, but the alternative is not working at all. So again, just thinking about livelihood and the need to work there. Fairly often I'll present people with very clear and specific information about my access needs, and they will fervently insist that their venue can meet those needs, is inclusive and accessible, etc. And I arrive to find it's absolutely not the case. I've lost jobs and I've been excluded so many times. Okay, so as part of that as well, we wanted to investigate some of the reasons for the disparity. And by the disparity, again, I mean that 1.8% statistic that Arts Council found of people who work in the music industry. What are those reasons that people aren't finding a way to the music industry? What is it about the industry that maybe seems inaccessible? So here are the sort of topics that I put forward as part of the consultation, and I asked people to agree or go from agreeing to disagreeing with these. So I asked, there are not enough role models with visible disabilities or health conditions working as performers or in senior management roles within the music industry. Overwhelmingly, people strongly agreed or agreed with this. You know, I spoke to artists who had achieved what they were doing, but said that they didn't know it was what they wanted to do when they were young, because they didn't see anybody who looked like them. There were no sort of role models to aspire to. And it's that old thing of, you know, name an artist with disability and people say, well, there's Stevie Wonder and Ray Charles, and think that that means that everything's hunky-dory. But yeah, that's 2 out of thousands of artists, and I know there are many, many more. But if you ask sort of any random person in the street, then they're the 2 names that they will generally be able to come up with. And this extends as well to offstage as well, and senior management roles, and not seeing people with disability in those roles as well. The next hypothesis was that there are not enough opportunities for young people with impairments or health conditions to engage in music and the arts. And again, strongly in favour of agreeing, and that's why organisations like Youth Music, I suppose, are here to offer these opportunities to 18 to 25-year-olds from diverse groups. So, you know, it's interesting that was also a strongly agreed with hypothesis. People who are disabled are discouraged from entering the music industry for fears over music venues not being accessible. I think there is a sort of connotation, if you like, that music venues are inaccessible, and I think that picture is getting better. You know, the statistics show that more venues are becoming accessible, and I see a couple of venues online today in this session who are renowned for having brilliant accessibility, and that's great. But you know, is there a kind of feeling that somebody wouldn't aspire to work in music because they know that they would struggle to get about in music venues? And on the same topic, in a way, you know, the music industry has a reputation for long hours, which can discourage people who are disabled, who may need more flexibility in their work. Again, a strong hypothesis. I think, especially in the touring industry, the attitude was always, you know, it was just, you go on your Facebook and you're friends with other sort of tour managers and other people who work as sound technicians and whatever in the music industry. And it's constantly a sort of humble brag about how many hours they're working and how long the tour's been. And I think, and I hope that the pandemic kind of changed that a little bit, and that people sort of started thinking about, you know, their own well-being and health and safety a bit more. And maybe it's not so cool to just be bragging about how many hours you're working, and maybe it's more cool actually to sort of look after yourself a bit more. But certainly in a hypothesis I was interested in exploring to sort of see if that reputation the music industry has might be putting people off who are disabled from working in the music industry. This is a key one. Media representations of artists with disabilities focus on tragedy rather than empowerment, creating a negative perception. From talking to people about this, there's a strong feeling that on the diversity groups, particular race and gender, media perceptions are far more positive, and they focus on the empowerment angle. And I think with disability, it can sometimes be different. I obviously have artists with disability who do media interviews every day, and very commonly the first question will kind of be like, what happened to you? Tell your story. Let's try and sort of feed into that, into the sort of sympathy side of it. I think there's more sort of sympathy than empathy than we find with other diversity groups, and vast majority of people agreed. A lot, just to say, of the 150 people who took this survey, probably about 70% were artists, and the rest were made up of backstage and music management and agency working staff as well. This is a genuine question I received just 2 weeks ago, which I thought I'd bring in here, which kind of maybe makes this point a bit stronger about media representations and how the media deal. This is a genuine question I received from one of my artists last week. There are many people who doesn't have a leg or a hand. However, we don't notice them in a crowd because they hide. They try to be invisible because they are obviously ashamed of their looks, and obviously they don't want others to feel sorry for them. Why are you as a stage artist decided to go a completely opposite direction? As you can see, that is just phrased all wrong to say that you are obviously ashamed of your looks. We rejected this interview, believe it or not, in the end. But it's almost saying, what gave you the courage to dare to be seen when obviously you should be ashamed? And I think that is just in a snapshot what the problem is there. A few things that they said as part of the consultation about the disparity and the reasons. It all comes down to representation, and that really extends the journey of disclosure. Seeing that represented and people coming through it okay would be so powerful. So I think, again, that is role models and how that could help. This is an interesting one, and one that I want to bring in here. The industry is built around relationships, courting, and bull, which is disabling for autistic people that aren't able to take words and sentences literally. Really important one, about neurodiversity as well. It's not just about people who are physically disabled or have a non-visible disability that they disclose. There's a lot of issues like that. The music industry is built around these networking opportunities, and it's not what you know, it's who you know, and all that thing. And I think that can be quite disabling for people, as this one writer said, especially for autistic people and people with other long-term conditions as well. And we don't want the sympathy vote, but we don't fit modern beauty standards. We want to be judged for our art, not to be an obstacle in its path. Not enough visibility at a mainstream level of disabled artists. That bottom comment is actually from Blair from the Mystery Jets, who we had interesting conversations about how the music industry is very visual in art, and people, it is a beauty industry in a sense, and how that can be a reason why we're not seeing enough artists with disability. Just one quick point on the pandemic, so I think it kind of hits home why how we can create positive environments for disabled people to thrive in music and beyond. I asked this question. In the last 12 months, the last 12 months have seen a steady movement towards a more online industry. Obviously, this was taken at the start of this year. So coming out of the main part of the pandemic, certainly the music industry was still in a bit of a hole. Venues were closed. So I asked that in the event that online activities become a more regular part of the music industry beyond the pandemic, does that make you feel more or less optimistic about your future in the industry? A lot of people not sure, but as you can see, more people more optimistic than less optimistic. And, when you think that is taken at a time when if you'd have asked a non-disabled artist at that time, I can guarantee that it would be less optimistic in the sort of 90% mark. But as you can see, I do think the pandemic was a bit of a leveler. It leveled the playing field a little bit with more things online. I spoke to artists and people, non-artists as well, who said that, I can suddenly attend every meeting, that I can be everywhere, that travel isn't a problem. and you know, venue problems aren't there. So if I'm doing an online performance at home, I'm less anxious and I'm able to work and to the best of my ability. And it's an interesting snapshot, I think, and one that really hits home that you know, if a person with a disability is in their own environment, or an environment that they're more comfortable, then they're likely happier, and they're likely more proactive as well, and efficient in their work. And I think that extends way beyond the music industry, but it can be a sort of lesson to anyone in any industry that you know, if you do create the right environments, then people can thrive, and productivity can be up for both the employer and the employee. And I think, you know, what I want to really stress today is, and you know, the need to sort of talk to people, and really to talk about what changes somebody will need, what reasonable adjustments do people need to help, you know, to really sort of get the best out of them and make them as comfortable as they can in their employment. So how we can all help to drive change. And I want to point you to a really key resource here, as we're talking about employment and environments. If any of you haven't checked this out yet, the Attitude is Everything's Accessible Employment Guide, which was launched this year, which is a really vital resource. And it covers things like, do your policies take into account staff with access requirements? Are staff's lived experiences listened to and considered? Is the working environment safe and comfortable? And are staff able to request reasonable adjustments if they need to? And here are the underpinning points of the guide. That everyone should be able to forge a career in the music and live events industries if they have the talent and drive to succeed. People are disabled by the barriers that they encounter. If you address those barriers, nobody should feel excluded from your workplace. You know, that goes on the sort of social model of disability, that it's not the actual health condition or disability that is disabling to that person. It's the barriers in that place that make them, that can make them disabled. Goes on to say, accessible working environments benefit everyone. The inclusion means thinking about everyone who may be excluded. Making a workplace accessible means thinking about every aspect of the working environment. Making people's access requirements is vital to enabling all of your employees to perform at their best. Disabled people are diverse and are the experts in what they need to make the working environment work for them. Not everyone who needs reasonable adjustments within the workplace will identify with the term disabled. People may not disclose their access requirements unless they feel they're in a safe environment to do so, which is exactly what we're talking about today. And that collaboration is key. Good practice should be shared, and employers should feel able to participate in making environment work more accessible. And when I talk about the need to talk more, I think this example is really hitting home what I'm trying to say. In 2019, Channel 4 reached out to all their staff and asked that if anybody wanted to come forward and talk about a disability or long-term condition, that they should feel welcome to, and that it would be dealt with head on, and that they would work with that person to make them more comfortable in their job and look at reasonable adjustments. And as you can see in this bottom right corner here, within 2 weeks, 90% of employees had updated their diversity data, and disabled employees had increased from 3% to 11.5%. When you think of such a huge organisation like Channel 4, for that jump to go from 3 to 11.5% is a huge, you know, a huge jump. And I think shows, maybe not in a music industry sense, but it shows that sometimes statistics are down to people not disclosing and not feeling able to disclose because they don't know how it will be treated. But if you actually go to your staff and say, what can we do to be to help a person with a disability, you know, and talk about reasonable adjustments, and those reasonable adjustments might not cost money. They might not be things that are around access barriers. It might literally be about the ability to work from home 1 day a week, or the ability to go to more doctor's appointments, or just reasonable adjustments that help somebody with a mental health condition as well. So I think that was a real sort of leading statement from Channel 4. And I think if that if that policy could be adopted in the music industry, especially with promoters, agents, and everything else, then I think we'd start to see the statistics change, and I think more people would feel, you know, more able to disclose and to talk about their health conditions. That's the end of the sort of presentation about the consultation that I ran. Just to sort of tell people that, you know, we talked about the incubator at the start, and Phoebe congratulated me for my grant. And just to say a bit more about that, you know, we're trying to increase representation of disabled people both on stage and off it. And that was the kind of reason I put forward for Youth Music grant, to create a program called the Disability Empowerment Program, which aims to bring on a member of staff for me, which will be obviously a young person between the age of 18 to 25 and with a disability. So we're increasing representation there of disabled people in sort of non-artist roles, and they will be empowered to work with a band, an artist, again, aged 18 to 25 and with a disability. So we're both, you know, we've got funding to support a program like an EP project. So the manager with disability will work with the artist to create a release plan, to do the A&Ring, to go through the production from mixing to mastering, and then manage the release strategy as well, and working with PR and working with distributors and getting the music out there. So that's the program that we're doing. And, you know, as we've got an audience of people who work in this field, if you know of anyone aspiring to work in the music industry as a manager, then, you know, I'd love to talk to as many people as I can who might be eligible for this role. And likewise, I'll be putting out some PR soon about the opportunity for the artist or the band. You know, want to sort of go as far and wide as we can and spread the word on that. So if anyone does know people who fit that bill, I'd love to hear from them. And yeah, that's all I really want to talk about today. But I'm open to any questions or comments from the audience. I know there's some great organisations in here that are doing some great things, and you know, I thank everyone for wanting to learn about this stuff, and hopefully that's sort of been a little bit helpful. Such a shame more companies don't adopt the same attitude as Channel 4. Hopefully more will follow soon. Yeah, totally agree. I think that was a really leading way of doing that. And you know, I think if more music industry companies do adopt that, I think it would be positive. But I think, you know, just to quickly say, one thing I am campaigning for is more sort of disability riders in the music industry as well, so that artists are more able to say the things that they need and feel that they will be listened to. You know, even if an artist doesn't have anyone on the team that has a disability, a long-term health condition, I think there should be a section on any production rider that has a little section that says, you know, access requirements, even if it says none underneath. You know, I think that sets the standards and makes people realize that, you know, access requirements aren't extra requirements, which I've had in the past. I had a venue manager once complain to me about access requirements, saying he didn't have time to do extra things. And, you know, obviously those things are not extra, they are completely part of that person's job to make everyone comfortable. So yeah, that's one thing I'd like to see is in terms of an on stage, but certainly try and increase representation off stage as well. Just check the comments. Would you have an access rider template you could share? Not yet, but yes, we're working on that. And there's a lot of organisations that are thinking on the same front with that. Certainly PRS for Music are trying to encourage it. I know Attitude are keen on it, but yeah, it's certainly something that I hope will become a little bit more commonplace soon. We are a disability confident employer. If anyone would like to chat offline about experience, happy to. Thank you, Owain. Yeah, and thanks Phoebe for posting the links to the sort of full consultation results, and sort of signposting Attitude's work as well. I think obviously, as we all know, they're the leaders in this. I personally, I don't claim to be an expert in all this. Until a year ago, I hadn't disclosed, and I think my story around disclosure and finding the right environments is an important one. But there's there's great companies around like Attitude who are the leaders in this, and certainly Youth Music doing their bit as well. Okay. A question: how do you word invitations to a project, program, or role to enable people with disabilities to feel safe and confident to apply? The right sounds helpful. Yeah, good question, Jane. And I think again, I did actually a course with Attitude a couple of months ago about wordings and for applications, and their advice was extremely helpful. I can't really cover all of them right now, but there's a lot of things to just sort of put in there around language and making it not too excluding for people with various disabilities or long-term health conditions. Don't try and put in the job specs, for example, must have a hard-working attitude and things like that, which can feel very sort of disabling for somebody who might need more adjustments to their work. I'd signpost the accessible employment guide there, Jane, quite strongly. Actually, I think there's some really strong things, and if you want to take that further, I think you can just sort of jump on with Attitude for an hour and do the same sort of course that I did. I think that was really helpful. Really interesting talk on statistics. Yeah, great to connect in Bristol. Absolutely, yeah, Bristol Beacon. I know you guys are doing some amazing things, and I know Sage is on here as well, who are renowned for doing some good things as well. Yeah, you got a mention in our section with the BPI. We had a session with the BPI on Thursday, and the Sage came up as a particularly good accessible venue, as did the Roundhouse. And I know the Bristol Beacon, from being a local boy, are doing some great things as well, and certainly I've connected with Siggy and some others there. Cool. Well, if no one else has got any comments or questions, thank you very much for tuning in. And as I say, if anyone does know anyone who would be eligible for the Disability Empowerment Programme we're starting next year with Youth Music, please do get in touch with me. I will just pop my email in the chat if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you so much, Ben. It's really interesting. You've got me thinking about so many things, even like, there's a lot of alcoholism, addiction, and then lots of mental health issues in the industry. And you'd be surprised how many riders will just be, here's your beer, enjoy. And it's like even the things of just like,
yeah,
checking before you arrive at, just,
yeah,
there's so many things that it just is assumed, right? It's just,
yeah, it's a very fast-paced industry, and it's quite rogue at times, I find, and I think that a lot of corners are cut, and a lot of people don't ask the questions that they should. And I think especially with this rider, I think it will just, if we can push this through and people are using accessibility or talking about accessibility needs more, but it needs to come from the top. It needs to come from every artist. It can't just be an artist with disability who puts it on the rider. I think we have to sort of have allies and get everybody involved in it. And
like the booking agents and stuff, because
booking agents, promoters,
sure, they're booking accessible venues in the first place, and working with venues and just,
sure, yeah. I mean, most of them are working on it, but I think that there's definitely a need for more allies. I think there's not enough people who are non-disabled who frankly care enough to really drive the changes, and I think that has to change. We need to, we're trying to talk to promoters and agents and get everything from the top, because we artists can't do it all. It has to sort of, is an agent going to stop booking gigs at a venue that is completely inaccessible? Are they going to make such a strong statement and do
exactly? It's really, really tricky.
Yeah, cool, Great.
Thank you so much. That was brilliant. And yeah, I'll send around all the resources and a recording, and we'll communicate obviously continually, this sort of thing. But yeah, thanks so much for joining, everyone, and have a nice day.
Thank you, everyone. And yeah, have a nice day. If you've got any other questions, just feel free to email me, and we'll, you know, happy to have a chat on the phone or chat on email.
Cheers, Ben. That was brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cheers. All right. See you later. Bye.
Bye.